equal. We fight the system built to perpetuate the superiority of one group over another.
This is our proclamation. We are the descendants of the peaceful, the children of the brave. We are the pebbles in the water that will start a new wave of change. We are Oromo. We're also from a geographical location called Ethiopia. However, we have never felt Ethiopian. That word has never embraced us. We've had our language diminished, our history atrophied, our books burned, our students killed, our leaders imprisoned, our existence detested, and our pain ignored. No more. We are Oromo. And therefore, it is in our nature to forgive. It is in our nature to want peace, to want freedom and justice. We are Oromo. Therefore, we are generous. However, we refuse to watch in silence while a two-headed beast engulfs in a feast while we starve at his feet. He tosses us the least bit of a portion of a piece and expects us to rejoice while we eat. No more. No more. So when we reclaim our uniformity and oneness and say, I am Oromo first, it is not ዘረኝነት ሰው መጥላት አይደለም. It is not tribalism. It is a recognition of our trials and tribulations. It is the unapologetic, uncompromising embrace of our identity. Being Oromo shouldn't be a political statement. It shouldn't be a polarizing issue. Our proclamation shouldn't be offensive to you. We are Oromo. We are fair and just, yet we are not pacifist. Be warned. You taught us violence and took our innocence, yet still we birthed warriors who want peace, who desire freedom and justice. We raise fighters, engineers, and doctors. If education is the passport to the future, then tomorrow belongs to us because we have studied our history and are inspired to tell our own story. We vow. We vow to raise Oromia from the ashes of the past like a phoenix, turn her into a land so beautiful, so scenic. Take a long, long look. Take a long, long look. We stand as our ancestors' prayers manifested. Take a long, long whiff. We are the winds of change, bathed in sage. We are their children who named themselves and claimed themselves the Sabona and the Sabontu, the Bona and the Bontu, the Erofik Arre. We won't just challenge the status quo, we will dismantle it. We have our feet on the shoulders of giants, the generals, poets, artists.
The Wako Gutus, the Tadesa Berus,
the Jarrah Bagadas,
the Ebisa Dunyas,
the Hajalu Hundaisas.
We are turning a new page. We are breaking every cage for everyone. For the Oromo, the Gurage, the Waleta, the Dorze. Take a long, long look. You can't keep us quiet. Our people have been inspired. We are no longer the little fires flickering within the riots. We are the riots. Our blade sharp, our mind strong, and if we must, we are ready to pluck you like the strings of a harp. I be you. We made you king and will dethrone you. We'll tear the wall down and the statue down and pull a crown off a tyrant. You tyrant! Oromia nibilisomti. Oromia nibilisomti by any means necessary, and the sight will be vibrant. You can search our history for agreeableness. You can look at our response towards compromise. You can study our silence or applause. We have always been just. Don't mistake our kindness for weakness. Don't overestimate our meekness. We have never wanted what's not ours. We protect and speak for those without powers until the curtain closes on our final hours. We are the voice for the voiceless. You see, the ability to inspire comes in the smallest of forms. It starts with recognition, yet your ego gets in the way of finding a resolution. Your sins are so great, they keep you awake in fear of retribution. I don't get it. I don't get it. Holding a country with pins and needles, using Band-Aid for bullet wounds, and then wondering why it hurts is the definition of ignorance. We refuse to be pacified by empty symbolic gestures of equality while being ravaged of our rights and humanity. You can't sow the seeds of hate and be surprised by the poisonous fruit. The winds of change are blowing and we are in pursuit. We reject mediocrity and the mediocre embraces of your unity. We are Oromo, through and through.
We are Oromo through and through.
We are Oromo, through and through.
We are Oromo, through and through.
We are Oromo through and through.
We are Oromos, through and through.
We are Oromo through and through.
We are Oromo, through and through. The Adam Jilos.
The Jatani Ali.
The Nariga Madas.
The Sheikh Mohammed Rashads.
This is our proclamation.
Hello, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Hawi Itana, and I will be the moderator for today's OSA Symposium. Today's panel will be focusing on the role of women and youth in the Oromo struggle. In just a few minutes here, our amazing, wonderful panelists will be introducing themselves. But before that, I wanted to allow Bonnie Halcombe, who is a member of the OSA board, and Kia Senyi, who's a member of the OSA Executive Committee, to share some words here before we begin. So Bonnie, I will give you the floor first.
I think Bonnie is muted.
Maui, did you mute me?
We can hear you, Bonnie.
Okay. Thank you, Howie. As Howie said, I'm a member of the OSA Board of Directors this year, and it's my pleasure to welcome everyone to this first OSA Symposium of the 2021 term. When OSA was formed in 1986 as a scholarly organization, established to increase the fund of knowledge related to the Oromo and related peoples in Northeast Africa, we discussed OSA's many roles. OSA has always had a double task: creating a fund of knowledge, interacting with and educating the society and the world about its findings, and also discussing bringing the real lived experience of Oromo to scholarship, and to raise questions for scholarship from what Oromos are experiencing it in their everyday lives. Several methods were discussed to develop these dimensions: conferences, workshops, publications, journals. There weren't websites and social media in those days. And OSA has been very heavy on conferences, but the workshops have been occasional. And this year's president and EC were determined to set up workshops that will accomplish these purposes of interacting with the community, discussing findings that OSA scholars have revealed, explore lived experience in real time, and bring key experiences and observation and vision to Oromo scholars that members should attend to. So that brings us to today, a symposium on women and youth. Now, OSA scholars have laid some groundwork regarding women and youth over the years, and especially regarding women, there are so many. I just do a checklist of people who have presented at OSA and brought scholarship that we have looked closely at that reveal the role of women. Gudrun Dahl wrote Suffering Grass. Anissa Kassam worked with Gammachu and other scholars over the years, culminating in the sacred knowledge traditions of the Oromo. Hilary Kelly has written on the moral authority of women in sustaining Gada values. Kue Kumsa has written many different works highlighting, one, the songs of exile, and looked closely at what specifically women bring to the struggle and how that ties with traditions. Perry Clem has explored many ways in which women pass private and public symbolic messaging. Leila Kashu on Etete, Zakia Posey on transnational networks, Chikage Oba-Schmidt, Sandra Schell uncovering capacity of the slave children, Marit Estebo on Wayo and women's rights, Lorraine Herbst, the late Lorraine Herbst, and many young scholars coming forward. So there is a wealth of knowledge that has been accumulated over the years. I would encourage all of you to look at the Journal of Oromo Studies. This journal and all of its past issues are on the OSA website, and there's information about the impact of Oromo youth and women and many other factors. You can go to the website and pull up every copy of the journal from 1993 up through 2011, and then more recent versions, and we're getting the 13 through 15 up. Also, if you go to the website, there's a set of conference proceedings from 2019, for example, and there were excellent programs on using Oromo folk institutions for women empowerment that Abeba Gamada and Dereji Fufa produced. So there's a wealth of knowledge. If when you come away from this, you want to go and look and see the legacy and the corpus of work that OSA has, you can begin there. So we know that women are the custodians of knowledge as much as men, and they're primary transmitters to the youth. So what we really have struggled over time to know what the role of women have been pre-conquest, prior to the attempts to completely dismantle Oromo culture, Oromo society. But we do have glimpses. For example, besides the silent women in rare photographs and the women who are mentioned by some observers who travel and wrote about Oromia, we know that gorgeous, strong, knowledgeable, and confident Oromo women were captured as slaves and taken to the Middle East, into Europe. Most disappeared without a trace, but some, such as Bilile and Pauline, were taken into Europe. And as they were debriefed, as they were encouraged to tell what they knew, they were exceedingly knowledgeable about every aspect of the landscape, the family, the spirituality, the songs, the maksa, the skills. Bilile probably is a better horseback rider than the Bavarian prince who was smitten by her. But this tells us a huge amount about how women were at least as knowledgeable, if not more knowledgeable than men, about all the dimensions of society. They were well educated. They had a clear, confident role and secure place in society that the women in today's panel and women in diaspora and across the country are working to reclaim. A full partnership and leadership is the full birthright of Oromo women, and what they've lost can be knitted back together. This is the working assumption here. Women's role in reconstructing and honoring Oromo culture and historical traditions needs to be better understood. The women who I mentioned in the beginning are working on that. To predict the saliency and the power of Oromuma in a future society, the women's understanding needs to be brought back in, and their role and in knitting together the foundations of Oromo institutions is important. They will continue to be essential in the decolonization of the Oromo and reconstructing Oromo sacred knowledge traditions. The key element we have here is the focus on duga and nega, on truth and peace. Oromo transmit that to children, and OSA shares as a nonpartisan organization focusing on scholarship to continue to push for truth so that peace can be established. And knowledge grounded in truth is a type of engaged scholarship. Today we see, we started with a proclamation of where Oromo youth are now, what their feelings are, what their observations are, what their lived experience is. OSA was grounded in engaged scholarship from its founding. And the consequences of that are enormous. It means that evidence developed is not isolated from events, but interactive. So in this panel, we have Oromo youth and women, youth speaking in the same voice. The panelists are young and are female. And so they speak to both of these categories in one full-throated proclamation. The framing of Oromo experience usually does not fully account for women's position, and we're struggling with that now. So there is a great need to get to the truth. The goal of the symposia is to engage audiences around themes that highlight what Oromo culture has revealed, as I said. And never has the United States and the world been more aware of the importance of the search for truth and the consequences of abandoning the truth. The Oromo experience in Ethiopia revealed those consequences long ago, and the struggle for truth is part of the past. This struggle for truth is part of past struggles for truth. So I am delighted to be here to frame what OSA hopes to achieve as an organization through these panels and these symposia. And it's my pleasure to welcome the panel participants and all who are listening live and all who may listen later. Thank you, Howie.
Thank you, Bonnie. Now we're going to go over to Kiyosenyi as he has some remarks to share.
Thank you, Howie. I think before I go to my remark, I would love to thank everybody who came to this panel. It's truly my honor to sit beside all this incredible women and as a OSA Executive Committee member, I would love to welcome you all. Again, I'm the only man in this group today, so you better be nice to me. I'm the technical guy. So,
Wow.
We are conducting this symposium because OSA strongly believes that we cannot build a future unless Oromo women take the leading role. And this is not only a woman, also some of people who are presenting today are also youth. So there is a growing recognition of untapped capacity and talent of women and women's leadership throughout the world at this time. So meaningful participation of women in the national, local communities, community leadership roles has become an important focus on the global development policy. So as an Oromo, we need to really kind of incorporate that to the Oromo society. So still, some people might say that why it matters if women become a political leader, elected official, or civil society activist. Why does the world need more women involved in all aspects of political process? This is not, by the way, only political, but I'm just talking from the political perspective. My answer will be, well, please try 1 week, 1 week world without a woman, then we will talk. This is just, this might seem like a joke, but imagine Oromo without Afrase. Somebody might say, he can go to Akko, but Akko is still a woman. So from that perspective, on a serious note, it's like women political participation results in tangible gain for democracy, including great responsive to citizenship needs and increase more sustainable future. So we can see the contribution of the Oromo women in Oromo politics throughout, is not, much is not said about Oromo women in general. And for the youth as well, we have seen a lot of times the youth really not given a seat. We can see that, I can say a lot on this regard, but I think things are changing a little bit now. So at this point, there needs to be a push from all sides of the society to empower women, the youth, to take the leading role in the Oromo transformation. The future belongs to the youth and the women, and the world is changing, so we might as well catch up. We are really behind. So I'm really honored to kind of organize this symposium as representing OSA. And I'm really, we usually complain about a lot of things that happens in our society, but and also men like to talk why the issue of women, but I think it's better if the woman talks to themselves. Usually me and Howie fights on this when I get involved, and they'll be like, I say, let's have a discussion about women's role, and they'll be like, you don't need to be in it. It's all women's matter. So, but I'm really glad that I'm here today. So I'm here to learn. I'm here to also for myself, as a youth, I to some degree, since this panel is about youth and women, I have my opinions and my thoughts on this matter, but I'm willing to listen today. And thank you very much. And I yield the floor back to Howard. Thank you.
Thank you, Kia. Really appreciate that. And also thank you both so much, Bonnie and Kia, and also to OSA, Kimlo Media, and OMN for streaming this panel and allowing us to highlight a very important topic within the Oromo community, both here and abroad. So the format of this symposium will include a question and answer section moderated by me. And then we will open up the floor to questions from the audience. We will be accepting questions through the comment section. So that's comments from Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So if you are a viewer out there and you have a question for any of our participants or panelists, please either ask us on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. So to get started, I am so extremely excited to speak with the panelists here today. Each of you are an inspiration in your own right, and I know our discussion is going to be extremely informative. So I wanted each of the panelists here today to introduce themselves, provide a bit of a summary of who you are, your journey in the Oromo struggle and activism, and describe what campaigns or initiatives you are currently or have been involved in. Let's start with Soreti and we can go from there.
Heddu Galatomi Hawi, thank you very much, Hawi, and the OSA institution for this platform and the opportunity on this really, are we still, okay, on this really important topic. OSA fi akka carratti ngalateeffadha kan har'a carraa kana nuu kennanii waan kana irratti dubbachuu fi waan kan hawaasni kenna guddinnaani irraa dhaga'uun nu jajjabeessa jedheetiin abdadha. Maqaan kiyya Soorettiidha, and my involvement in the community has been really since I was a kid, probably since the age of 13. So hawaasa keessatti waa barachuu waa arguu carraa miti qoodallee xiqqoo fudhachuuni yeroo ijoollummaa kee keessarraadha waggaa I would say 13 irra. And I when I was about 15, 16 started to engage in the youth platforms available in the Melbourne, Australia community. So what we had then, the International Oromo Youth Association, and taking opportunities to organize events like our graduation ceremonies and other, activities for young people in the wider community. Achirrani yero guddateetiin deemu waa'ee siyaasaa kennaa baradhee waa'ee seenaa kennaa baradhee. And my interests were growing towards political involvement. And so that's really been the space that I've been involved in or interested in since probably about the age of 18, 19, I'm 26 now, for some years. And then also akka artistitti, akka barreessitutti, waa'ee qabsoo kennaa waa'ee aadaa kennaa Oromummaa jenneetiniin ani ibsuu fi yaada guddaa qaba, abdii guddaa qaba. So even as an artist, it's never been separate from my interest and passion for the Oromo struggle. Amma fiyo jedhee carraa kam keessatti qooda qaba moo qabsoo keenya keessatti akkamitti ilaala akkamitti keessatti dalagaa jira yoo jedhee ani hacaaluun yeroo wareegame irraa waan walaabummaa kennaa waan abbaa biyyummaa kennaa kanarratti harka siyaasaa carraa siyaasaan itti dalaguu fi abdadhaa and san keessan jira. So since the assassination of Hachalu Hundeessa, my interests have become even, I guess, more so politically entrenched and towards a certain political alignment, and that's discussing and raising awareness about Oromia's independence and rights to sovereignty and I guess this freedom again. So akkasitti carraa kam moo dhaaba kam keessa jira walaabummaa jedhama gamtaadha. Gamtaan kuni karoorri isaa waan walaabummaa keenya irratti dubbachuu fi tarkaanfii siyaasallee fudhachuu fi qabsoo hidhannoo keenyallee jajjabeessuu fi waa'ee beekumsa irratti illee waa'ee resource irratti illee. So the intention of the platform walaabummaa that I have been involved in since the assassination of Hachalu, the intention of it has been to discuss in as many platforms and spaces as possible within our community and outside of it the need of Oromo's independence, to organize for it practically, to discuss and raise awareness about and strengthen resource-wise our armed struggle and really all things independent. So I think that's a sufficient introduction. Thank you very much, Howie. And I'm very happy to be here with all these wonderful women.
Thank you so much, Dorothy. That was a great introduction. Arfase, we will move on to you for your introduction.
Okay. Akkam jirtan galatoom Howie. Maqaan kiyya Arfase Gammadaati. I think qabsoo hawaasa Oromoo akkamiin keessatti hirmaadhu yoo jedhe diqqeenna irra jalqabuu qaba. I think namni hundinuu wanni jalqabaan utubaan kan barbaachisu maatiidha. Maatiin kiyya waan biyya alaa guddadhee fi seenaa kiyyaa fi seenaa maatii kiyyaa fi eenyummaa kiyya barsiisa. I think sun hedduu barbaachisa. Maatiin barsiisa duraa sunna barsiisanii yoo addunyaatti ba'u hawaasa dhibii keessatti confidencein baha, right? Eenyummaa kiyya ibsachuu danda'a, qabsoo kiyyallee ibsachuu danda'a. Kasunit aanee gaafa waldaa dargaggoo Oromoo Minnesota asit jaarru dhiiraaf dubartii taanee waldaa sun jaarre. And waldaa dargaggoo sun jaaruun I think gahee guddaa taphatee jiru keessatti. Maaf jechuun akkamiin akka dhaab tokko jaaran na barsiise, akkamiin akka dhaab tokko hoogganan na barsiise. Eenyummaa kiyyallee akkasuma cimsee na jabeesse. And then dhaab tokko keessallee yoo gaheen kan kee waan taphachuu qabdu taphattee fixxee akkamiin akka keessa ba'an si barsiisa, right? Waan tokko waan jaarteef callaa achi keessa jiru kan kee guutuu achi keessa turuun waan hin qabnee fi sunillee si barsiisa. And then kabiraallee hawaasa Oromoo keessallee osoo hin taane addunyaa bakka hojiitti hawaasa Oromoo hin taane waliin akkamiin akka waliin hojjechuu dandeettullee leadership skill hedduu na barsiise waldaa dargaggoo Oromoo keessa jiraachuun. Kabira gaafa OMN illee jaarru wanni I think dhaab hunda kan keessatti hirmaadha akka hagammaa sun hedduu jaaladhe. Maaf jennaan namni keessatti hirmaatan osoo xiqqaa guddaa hin jenne dhiira dubartii hin jenne dandeettii fi beekumsaan keessatti hirmaannee jaarree. And namni hundinuu akka sun OMN bakka gaye arguu hin dandeettanii. It was very well balanced organization gaaf jalqaba ijaaruuf jajjabeessuuni. So sun keessa sun darbee hammaa wanneen hojjechuu jiru waa'ee advocacy adda addaa irratti hojjechuu jira. And dhaabni dubartii jabduu jedhama taree Facebook irratti argitanii. Jabduuni akkamiin dubartii lafa ka'u jirtu jajjabeessinee akkamiin akka siyaasaa biyyi kana Ameerikaa jiraadha ammaa fi Ameerikaa keessatti biyyum jiran keessatti akkamiin itti hirmaachuu danda'an. Nu biyyan baa keessa jiraanna hawaasa keenya calla keessa seennee waa hojjechuu irraa akkamiin bakka biraa seennee eenyummaa keenya achi keessa seensisuu dandeenya. Especially yeroo ammaa kan keessatti hedduu barbaachisaa ta'e nu garsiise. Yoo rakkoon biyyatti kaatu dhuga kaanee sagalee uummata keenyaaf ta'an jennaa. Ammoo deemnee nam dhibii kadhachuu qabnaa, nam dhibii waa'ee Oromummaa barsiisuu qabnaa. So instead of nam dhibii barsiisuu irraa akkamiin uf leenjifnee dubartootaaf hawaasa keenyallee leenjifnee akka bakka adda addaa kan seenanii eenyummaa keenya achi keessa calaqqisuuf jennee sun hojjechuu jira. Fuulduratti hin argitanii waan dhaabni kun godhu. So ammaaf sunum jedha galatoom hawwii.
Thank you, Arfase Galatomi. The next person we're going to go to is Maro. Maro, please introduce yourself.
Hi, akkam jirtu fayyaa keessanii hawwii fayyaa ta'e. Maqaan koo Marartuudha. I grew up in an Oromo community in the diaspora. And so I remember since a very, very young age being surrounded by Oromos. When I was younger, attending Oromo community events, and many of the leaders of that community that I grew up in being Oromo women, such as Ade Iftu and Ade Jannet in the DC Oromo community, participating in protests and things like that. As we all know, unfortunately, this Kabso has been passed down through generations, so that has been, a strong part of many of our experiences. But my involvement in Oromo advocacy and activism as an individual, as my own person, really started when I was about 15 years old, and I attended the Oromo Youth Leadership Conference. That was my first time being surrounded by that many Oromos my age or a little bit older, because I think Howie and I actually were probably the youngest ones there. But, I actually have to say, being on this panel with Arfase, for example, it's so funny because Arfase is one of the people that really inspired me, especially growing up. From that experience at the Oromo Youth Leadership Conference, seeing Oromo women like Arfase, as well as like Rami Mohammed and Leila Bawari. And from there, I was really inspired to continue being involved on the board of the International Oromo Youth Association, as I was in college. And from there, I've been involved in different capacities throughout the years. For several years, I've been involved with the Oromo Advocacy Alliance, which is a phenomenal, heavily women-led civic engagement organization that is advocating for peace, justice, inclusive governance, economic well-being, and respect for human and civil rights of the Oromo people and other peoples in Ethiopia. It's a grassroots organization with heavy involvement from Oromo women and others from all walks of life. During the initial Oromo protest movement, and then more heavily during this, I guess you could say, resurgence of the Oromo protest movement, I've been involved in social media activism and organizing through that. And again, through this work with Oromo protests, I have collaborated very, very heavily with Oromo women around the world who are so dedicated, driven, and talented. And this is also another heavily women-led movement, I would say. And then most recently, some of my friends and fellow Oromos and I started a group called Team Free Oromia, which including a podcast called the Free Oromia Podcast, which is focused on amplifying the voices of freedom and making the conversation about Oromia's freedom and liberation a mainstream topic. And once again, this is a very heavily women-led initiative. So you may have noticed multiple times I've mentioned how women have been so integral to my involvement in the Oromo diaspora community throughout my life. And it's true, my activism and advocacy work has been heavily shaped and influenced by the work of Oromo women. And I think this is so important because it's made it that much easier for me to be able to get involved and take leadership roles, because in all of these spaces, I'm not the first Oromo woman, because women before me have paved the way and have showed me from a very early age that Oromo women are central to the Oromo struggle for freedom. And that said, I'm really happy to be here today, surrounded by all of you amazing women and leaders, more importantly. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion today. And thank you to OSA for hosting this symposium.
Wow, thank you, Maro. And then we're going to go to Najat so she can share her introduction as well. Najat?
Galatoma hundi keessanuu, I guess namoota as gubbaa jiran hundaa, I guess yoo wajjin waa directly hojjennu baannullee waa'ee Oromummaa keenyaa fi waan adda addaa irratti wal dhagayaa turre. Seenaan tiyyaa ani ijoollummaa kiyyarraa magaalaa Direedawaa Bahaa Harargeetti. Eenyummaan kiyya kan qabsoo jechuun waan achitti tahaa ture kan nuti ijaan agaraa guddanne jechuudha. It's like an imprint of sorts. Events that was taking place in our school, in our surrounding areas, the stories that we hear about the struggle, women, men, youth, child, all sectors of our society. And so seenaalee sanii fi waan just like a first eyewitness accounts of exactly how dire our situation were as people. So suni wanni guddoodha qaba ilaalcha nani Oromummaa fi bilisummaaf qabuuf jechuudha. San booda baqannee Keeniyaa dhufnee, Keeniyaarraa ammoo as dhufnee gaafa as dhufnu seenaan kiyyaa fi kan Arfaasee, Leeyilaa fi warroota kaanii wal fakkaata. Maaliif akka as dhufnetti Oromoon hedduun hin turre, ammallee pilaatfoormiin hedduun illee hin turre, garuu OYA'n waldaan dargaggoota Oromoo kan yeroo san dhaabbatee ture walitti nu qabee eenyummaa keenya akkan daganne akkan irraanfanne waan seenaa Oromummaa fi sababaa itti biyyaa buqaanee as dhufne argitee akka gajjabeessinee yaadannu waan goonu guyya guyyaan jechuudha. Hedduun agargaare. So achitti wal bareechuudha obboleeyyan kiyya kanaa wajjini. Just like Maratu said, Arfase and Leila and a bunch of other women were my inspiration from the get-go. And of course, I have that imprint. I have the family history like many Oromos do. And ever since then, it's been a love affair of sorts to be involved in anything small or big, to try to make a difference here and there, in everything I could. Funny story, my first involvement on the social media part of things happened due to Teddy Afro's situation or controversy at the time. And I decided for the first time to pick up my pen and say something, and that's kind of catapulted me into this space where I felt like, okay, I have something to say and people better listen. And so I've been in that space for a long time, as well as being involved in everything big and small on the ground, trying to make a difference for us. However, I feel like right now there's a static electricity in the air about women being energized worldwide, and to kind of take that space. Women are no longer asking for a seat. They're making a seat, they're taking a seat, they're leading. And so it's an exciting time to be alive and to be able to see that. That's been a dream of mine. And I'm honored to be among you today. And I'm also aware of the struggles that we carry as a woman, on top of the problems and the struggle itself within the struggle for the Oromo woman to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be credited for all the things that we do. But there's also a humbling situation where as women, we don't really seek those things. We really do these things for the sentimental reason that we believe that we as people, as society, should continue to claim who we are. So that always gives me comfort. Dubartoonni Oromoo qabsoo kan qabsaanii uummata isaaniitii fi jijjiiramuma dhugaa san fiduu fi malee mataa isaaniitiif bakka ofiif kennu akka hin taane generationarraa generationatti waan argaa guddadhe jechuudha. So galatoomaan isiniin jaaga. I can't wait.
Thank you, Najat. That was great. So thank you all so much. Hamile, you guys are very, very inspirational. I'm so happy to be here in this virtual studio with you all. So now we're going to get into our discussion questions. And for our first question here, I'm hoping that each of you will be able to answer. Our first question is regarding Oromo women and their involvement in the struggle. Oromo women have always played a role in the Oromo struggle, even despite the lack of credit that they and us have received. Is there a story or a memory that you have about an Oromo woman or a specific group of Oromo women in the struggle that have inspired you and your activism and the work that you do now? Actually, Najat, we're going to start with you and then go from there.
So the stories of Oromo women, there are so much. out there, but I can say like a small stories that are not even visible to the mainstream, right? Like one ganda keessatti ta'u, one haadha argitee qabsoo tana gaggeessuuf hidhamtee tumamtee maal magaalaan itti guddadhe keessatti jechuudha. For example, Dureedaa. I remember argitee the woman, the mothers paid a very high price in those times in the late 90s when things were really going to hell for our people. And I remember one particular woman who had to pay the ultimate price in refusal to give up certain information in our neighborhood. And she did that without hesitation. She did that without no regard for, like maybe she's going to be remembered, maybe she's not going to be remembered, but she did that. And I remember hearing that as a child and just going like, did she not care about her children that she left behind? Or, and then it dawned on me as I grew up, that sacrifice was like twofold, because she left her children exposed to whatever comes next, but she felt compelled that that sacrifice was more important than her playing the motherhood role and leading her children forward. And she felt like that should have been the statement that's made with her life. And that kind of made the whole area youth inspired to jump into armed struggle and many other forms of struggle in our area and in the whole entire city. Because I heard the stories of, if she can do that, I have no excuse to sit back. And so that's what a woman can do for you. Like when a man, gets out there, it's kind of a societal expectation of they should be out there promoting this and that. But when a woman does that, she is like a page of knowledge, of wisdom, of strength that's being ripped out. And if she's willing to, put herself in that space, then it kind of cements that commitment for all other sectors of our society to kind of, jump on that plane and go forward. And the only thing that's reminiscent of that kind of a sacrifice for me is the Haramaya woman, protests that erupted. That's the kind of sacrifice we're talking about. They know they're putting their bodies, their limbs, their families, their own very safety and their very own life in danger to further the agenda of our struggle towards something that we're working forward to. So that kind of stuff, it makes you, it gives you hope in your darkest days when you feel as a woman that you're not even being heard with your own people, you're not being seen. But these kind of stuff is like a shiny corner in your darkness, even when you're wallowing in that, and it gives you that courage to pick yourself up and to continue. So for me, that was the story that I carry with me. And then there is a story of my mother. That's an entirely different story. But those kind of stuff, that it's like not one particular story. It's a stories of women that we never heard or seen from, but that have played an important role in the areas they're from, in hearts and minds of the people that either witnessed their stories or heard their stories and kept that in their forefront as we continue to fight this fight.
Thank you so much, Najat. Even hearing that right now inspired me. So thank you for sharing. Sureti, we'll move on to you.
Yeah, thank you, Elwie. I was raised by women, mostly women, up until like quite a formative age, like my early teens. So I grew up surrounded by women, and it's women like my mother and my auntie who made immeasurable sacrifices to see that I got to the place in life that I'm currently in, see that I had all the opportunities at least to choose to pursue what I wanted to pursue. So that I would begin there, because it's not necessarily related to, to Kapso or to the Oromo struggle, but it is, it has been witnessing their strength and their ability to just choose others over themselves and continue to sacrifice for me and the people around them, that begun to form in my mind what characteristics I believe make a whole sound human being, someone that I'd like to grow up to be. And even if there are disagreements in terms of like worldviews and whatnot, it's the character of these women has really created the backbone of, I think, the character that has allowed me to continue on to join this struggle so passionately. And then had said earlier that I had begun to really pay attention to this struggle and then participate in this struggle at a young age, at about the age of 13. And why that was possible is because it was so normalized. Like, I grew up around women like Ade Tolto Tufa, like Ade Aisha Ali, and even my peers who I was organizing with at that young age, women like Iftu Kasim, Britu Ababulgu, and then also like Ade Yasmin Hassan in the Melbourne community. You know, they were just in leadership roles. That's what I saw. That's what I believed was normal. That's what I thought you do, right? If you want to do it, you do it. Kanaafuu ani akka ilaale qabsoo keessatti qooda fudhachuun akka dubartiin waan hedduu guddaa miti ofitti jireetiin ilaalaa ture. Namni hundi goraa jiranii dubartiin kan akkana jira, kan akkana jira, kan akkana jira. They're all around me. So, you know, if I have that desire, I should be able to do it. So I think that was really essential for me. And it's interesting that because I had the mentality that kun waa salphaadha. Dubartii taateetiin qooda fudhachuun waa irraa dubbachuun hin jiru, waa irraa like ima danda'ama jedheetiin yeroo laalu achirraan you know dhaaba tokko seenuu moo carraa fudhachuu moo qooda fudhachuun, when that was, you know, in subtle ways contested, because I wouldn't say that it was like, you know, from my memory ever contested overtly, but in subtle ways contested that this isn't my place or I shouldn't be in this position. That was strange to me because my normal was like women are leading, have been leading ever since I was a kid. That's all I've understood or known. Sanirati kanan jedhu, what I have found inspiring over the last, you know, couple of months and what I've been really paying attention to is qabsoo hidhannoo keessatti dubartiin qooda guddaa qaban. And qooda haggana ta'uu qabsaa jechuun, you know, falmachuuf illee qooda guddaa qabanii. And you know, women like Jal Bilise, women like Jal Gabbise, women like Jal Falmaktu, who put their desire to see this freedom, this walabummaa kana argachuuf biyya keenyaa fi before any sense of insecurity they might have, before any sense of fear they might have, or doubt they might have. And that's the mentality that I've you know, really been able to absorb by just witnessing these women, not just qabsoo hidhannoo keessatti, but across our qabsoo. I think that after the assassination of Hajjal Hundesa, I had to really like look at all the women across my life in the past and also the women around me now and the women I'm seeing in the struggle now, and realize that every single one of them have gone through really difficult struggles, but the fact that I can even see them in these positions is something that should be one irraa abdachuu danda'a, one hamilee naaf kennuu danda'a, and that, yeah. So I don't know if I'm really asking the question anymore, but it's not really one particular story, but women across my life, women currently that I get to witness, are a source of great inspiration.
Thank you, Soreti. That was amazing. Mara, we'll go on to you.
Thank you. I really identify with what both of you have said, Najat and Soreti. I think for me, what comes to mind is political prisoners, and the way that Oromo women have been uniquely impacted by the mass political imprisonment by the Ethiopian government. And you know, women, including girls, pregnant women, mothers, grandmothers, who have been imprisoned for their political beliefs or political involvement, or even a connection to those who are activists or freedom fighters. And also Oromo women who have had their loved ones, whether it be, you know, maybe their husband or their son, or their father, politically imprisoned, and are now responsible for holding things down, for not only maintaining a household and, you know, raising children in many cases, but also supporting the whole family, most likely in the absence of a breadwinner. And I think that, you know, thinking about the situation of political prisoners and how this impacts the lives of so many Oromo women in throughout Oromia, it's, you know, it as Soriti said, right? It's just, we can't even think about, you know, if you're going to be involved or not. It's, to me, it's kind of, there is no other choice, especially when you, knowing that people like me in Oromia, if they were doing what I was doing, would be jailed or worse. Because I live in, you know, relative freedom every day. I have freedom of speech. It's, yeah, there's no really choice for us, I think.
Thank you for that, Maro. Arfase, open the floor for you.
In addition to all the women that all the three ladies mentioned, I think personally for me, a person that inspired me is Adekwe Kumsa. You know, we all know her history. She was Hidamte, Dararamte. You know, she's been through so much as a human being. But what I gravitate towards is like every time when you talk to her, you wouldn't know what she's been through, right? She has just this calming presence. She talks to everyone as equal. Doesn't matter who you are, no matter what mood you're in. Sometimes, I mean, for me, she's a mentor. You know, like I can call her and then she'll calm me down from wherever I am or whatever I may be struggling with. I feel free to talk to her and she'll say, okay, if I say bring it back, you know, and she kind of brings that sense of calm to me just hearing her voice. And as I think Najat mentioned, everything that she's done and she's been through, she didn't do because she didn't do for the attention or for the credit, and she continues to do that work, but she doesn't get that credit or she doesn't get acknowledged. And part of what happens in maybe many societies is you get labeled as, you know, so and so's daughter, so and so's wife, so and so's this, so and so's that, and your individual contribution is not acknowledged as much. And I think that's something that, at least as a community, we have to change. I mean, it's not bad to have these titles, but that's not all you are. Especially, you know, if you're involved in the struggle, there's more than that you contribute to the struggle. So I think making that a habit as a community helps, you know, even for the younger generation to see, right? As Soretti was saying, for her, this is a norm. She didn't have to say, my girl, can I do this? Should I do this? She's seen so many great examples in her community, but these examples have to be in the books, in the research, in the things that our kids read, so they can see that, you know, someone else has done this before me. What happened? What were some of the roadblocks that they faced? What lessons can I learn from it? So for me at this point, what I would like to do is be what Adekwe has been to me to someone else who's younger, so they don't have to go through those same struggles or roadblocks that I've been through. So she is definitely one of my top in so many different ways. I love her, and thank you, Adekwe, if you ever watch this, for all that you do for all of us. And I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yes, thank you to all the women that came before us. They definitely set the foundation to what we're doing now. So now we're going to go into our second discussion point. And that is, what do you believe your niche in terms of activism or advocacy is, and how did you find your place there? Whether your niche is social media, political involvement, fundraising, or whether you have no specific niche and you think you fit in anywhere. I was wondering if we could discuss this specific point, and I'll open it up to the floor. Whoever wants to answer can answer, and then we'll move on from there. So the floor is open.
I'll go. My niche, I think it's advocacy. I mean, ever since a young age, I've always been advocating for Oromos. And it's like Arfase Oromo, and even my friends call me Oromo, right? It's now, the time that we're in now is a bit different. Miti makan Oromo wan hara miti. Most people know who Oromos are or where Oromia is. So you don't have to be so much in people's faces as much. I mean, we're still educating, but it's not as before. So for me, I like I like the advocacy part of it and the political involvement, but it's mostly, I think we're still raising awareness and telling people about who Oromos are, who we are, what our struggle is, what is happening.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to hop in there to talk about their niche and how they found where they fit in the Oromo struggle?
I'm happy to go next.
Okay.
So I don't know if I thought I heard someone else's voice. My niche right now, and I think for the rest of my involvement in the Oromo struggle for the rest of my life, will probably be like that space between political involvement and advocacy, and particularly on the agenda, as I had mentioned earlier, of Oromia's complete liberation, Oromia's complete freedom. I think that it's a political conversation that requires a lot of attention to complexities to really make it a reality, and it involves talking about it in practical ways within our community, but also outside of our community. And I came to this niche, or came to an interest on this agenda, as I have mentioned a few times on this panel, after the assassination of Hachalu. And the reason that was a catalyst for me is just a week before, I had spent about 6 months, mostly in Finfinne, and was, like a lot of Oromos, trying to make something of the breadcrumbs of this reform into, something sustainable for the Oromos, and particularly interested in the dialogue process and between different nations and nationalities in the country, and looking at our histories and the controversies between them and what reconciliations needed to happen, and feeling like there wasn't any genuine interest really amongst institutions in the country to do this, even though if there were interest at a grassroots level. And then the assassination of Hachalu occurring, and what really struck me was how deep the erasure of the Oromo's place in Ethiopia's history, as the Oromo believe it to be, as the Oromo consider it to be true. That erasure was so alarming to me, and it made me realize that the most productive thing that I believe I can contribute to, politically speaking, is to see a new paradigm, as I like to call it, created, a new national paradigm created, so that these same conversations that are still important can actually happen, because we're talking and we're thinking under a new imagination and new leadership. So as a creative, I think I'm drawn to this niche as well, because it requires communicating messaging in somewhat of a creative way, and thinking creatively and engaging our community creatively.
Great, that's amazing. And I'll leave the floor open for this question before we move on, if Moro and Najat had something to add. If not, we can move on. Alrighty.
I could just add, I guess for me, it's kind of a mix of things. I guess more in the social media realm and also in the advocacy realm. Mm-hmm. Mostly because I personally try to do what's needed. So I feel like, if there's a need for something, that's what I try to do, rather than doing something that I may not be either as good at as maybe someone else who can do it better, and also just trying to be as useful as possible. And so I think that's kind of how I've ended up doing the social media and advocacy.
All right.
I guess I can also add, I agree a little bit with Maritu. My niche is need-based, so whatever comes up that I think I can contribute in, usually I get pulled into different corners, whether that's social media, advocacy, or something in our local communities, or the biggest role, I guess, would be playing a conduit between our communities on the ground via social media, and bringing their voices, their issues, their concerns to the bigger communities in the diaspora here, whether that's a small project or individual-based need that they reach out for. And so that's the role I've been prominent in, but usually it's a need-based situation where whatever is needed, I can jump in or have the time to do that. I usually don't ask twice. However, I can say that I trimmed my involvement a little bit since Agile because I had to do a little bit of personal reflection to kind of go into my own space, trying to figure out where can I be of consequence, like something that I could morph into that can do something other than what I've been doing before. Not that it wasn't effective, but more specific targeted goals. And I have yet to find a home specific to that goal yet, but I'm pretty sure there are things that are being crystallized here and there that might be, good for me to be stepping into.
Perfect. It sounds like everybody runs the gamut. Everybody can do a little bit of something. So that's great to hear. Moving on into our next question, and I'm hoping every panelist will be able to answer. But I was wondering if we could discuss some of the challenges each of you have encountered in your activism, in your advocacy, and how you've overcome them. So let's start with Najat, and then we'll go from there.
Being a woman is a blessing and also a curse when it comes to specific societies, right? There are elements who see you just for that, like, your gender comes first, and no one is interested in the skill sets and the qualities that you bring, or the resolution and commitment and leadership and all these other things that is a battle-tested skills that you carry with you. So automatically, as soon as they see you, all they see is a woman, and they can't get over that hump. And so I usually think of like patriarchy as a system is a narcissistic one. And so whatever they can own and make it be about themselves, they will do, whether that's your skill or what you bring to the table, or a little bit maybe, if you're too confident, it's like you're arrogant. Instead of, look, this is somebody who knows her value and this is what she's carrying. So it's always, we're interpreted as like, something other than who we are. And so I use humor. Humor has been the best weapon for me. So humor allows you to address those issues in a manner that is not combative for the patriarchy to yell back at you in a sense. And so that's what I've been doing to survive in that space. And quite honestly, it can be exhausting and lonely at times. But then again, you look at women who have done far worse, who have went through, a lot more than we have. And you remember that, you remember the privilege you carry from being from here, from being the person that you are. And then you kind of come back to your senses and kind of carry yourself from there. So humor, strong woman and inspiration, and also remembering that this is bigger than any one of us, male or female. The goal of Bilisuma and Walabuma is larger than any of us combined. But I believe it's like a picture and a pixel. Like, each pixel creates the wholeness that we're seeking. And as soon as you see it that way, you can kind of endure whatever comes your way as a woman and remind yourself why you are in that space to begin with. I would prefer if patriarchy didn't exist and that we all are celebrated for the persons that we are and the contributions that we bring to the table. But I don't think we're there as a society and also as the world. And the other more important point I want to make is it is all about colonization, right? Because our society did not have this hierarchy. It wasn't part of our DNA. It's part of the reconstruction, decolonization, I guess, project. And I see myself as, working towards that reclaiming of our authentic Oromuma that sees everything in balance. And so it's all an effect of what we have endured as people. And so when you make it bigger than yourself like that, it no longer becomes a gender issue, but it becomes more about reclaiming our authentic selves as people, and it's part of that struggle moving forward.
Great, thank you for that. I'm going to hop over to Arfase actually and ask her to answer this question.
One of the biggest challenges is being the only woman in a space, right? And Hawaski in our community, one of the things that, you know, most organizations like, oh, we need one woman, we need one youth, and then like 50 other members of that board are men. But it's always like, we just need one woman. That is like one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, why only one woman? We're not trying to fill a quota, right? We're running an organization. So I think being in those spaces before, I mean, I think as you grow and you get older, you learn that, okay, how do I bring more women in? They're not going to, I mean, they may not say, oh, let's balance it out at least 50-50, if not more. I think being able to speak up and trying to change that system from within, I think is important. And that's kind of one of the ways that I've been trying to deal with getting out of that. We just need one woman and one youth. So that's one of the challenges.
Yes, it's a very prevalent challenge. So Ritzy, we're gonna go to you.
I'll begin by saying I really relate to what Afase just articulated of being expected to come in as the one woman or the one youth. And that's really challenging because people who extend that invitation often don't want to hear what you want to say, at least from my experience, outside of what they expect the one woman or the one youth to say, or what void they think needs to be filled. And I found that really challenging around the 2014 protest, like the first kind of big wave of the Oromo protest movement, the one that, you know, led to the dictatorship falling in 2018. That at that time, I was really motivated and really excited for what I believed to be like a revolution I thought I'd never seen in my lifetime happening in Oromia, and I wanted to contribute via my interests. And you know, it was more so as a young person, I think. And I can also feel that it was influenced by people believing that I should contribute, you know, via what they believe to be my skills. But I was really interested in things like political strategy and wanting to shape the way we engaged our government or representatives or any advocacy that we did. But I did feel that I was kind of put in a little corner here, you know, work on the video scripts, which again, probably influenced by people saying that that's a skill that I have. But I think it's also influenced by not really being able to hear the whole woman or the whole young person. And I think another challenge is like once there's one woman leader, and even women fall into this, we as women fall into this, like, because we maybe we don't see multiple women in high positions at the same time, and we don't think there's enough space. There is a sense of like keeping each other away, and then also not just us, but like community believing, again, that's enough. And then another challenge for me, I would say like on top of that, is just not feeling like I had the capacity to lead, knowing I had the skill, but just doubting it every single step of the way. And I wouldn't say that that's not the case anymore. I'd just say that I think, as Najat mentioned, the bigger picture is so much more important, so much more clear since Hajjal assassination, that it's much easier to like sideline those thoughts or those doubts. But yeah, that sense of will I really be able to do this right? You know, am I going to do it wrong? Will I harm people in the process? Is there someone better than me for this? Why am I in this position? Like, why me? Like, those thoughts are definitely something that's been a challenge for me. But and overcoming it has just been a process of realizing that that's a really human experience, and that the struggle is something that, I mean, belongs to everyone, so it belongs to me as well. And my desire to contribute to it is much more important for me to see fulfilled than, I guess, have all the answers. Am I right? Am I good? Am I, you know, whatever for it, and before I start, sort of thing. So I hope that made sense.
Yes, very much so. Mara, we'll go on to you now.
Yeah, I you know, recognize a lot of what you all are saying, and have had similar experiences. I think we've all been in meetings where you know, people are being nominated for leadership roles, and you know, after nominating a bunch of men, somebody says, oh well, let's have beef to or bone to or, you know, whatever woman that's in, you know, around the space, and it's just simply to have that woman representation, but as you all said, not necessarily to with the intention of valuing that input and maybe the unique input that they can bring to the table. I generally operate from the frame of reference that gender is a social construct, but that said, it doesn't mean that it's not a very real thing, because we are a society, so we're full of social constructs. And I think one thing that would be excellent to really add into our Kabso and to the Oromo struggle is intersectionality. For those who are not familiar, intersectionality is, a framework for analyzing and understanding the way that a person's different social, political identities and life experiences can overlap and intersect to create different forms of discrimination and prejudice, but also privilege that they may face. And so it's possible, everyone has multiple different identities, whether that's race, gender, possibly religion, especially when if the religion is a visible trait, class, sexual orientation, physical ability, the list can go on to include different sub-identities as well. But it's possible that one of your identities can be something that causes you prejudice and discrimination, but another of your identities within, your experience can give you privilege over someone that has a different identity. And so I think that, we're in the middle of a movement for freedom to liberate our people from oppression and state tyranny. And in that process, we cannot also condone forms of discrimination within ourselves. And so I think it's really important that as more women, because they're more impacted by things like this, they're more aware of it. And so I think that that's a really important dynamic, and I hope that we can continue making our struggle more intersectional. And I think as far as how I have dealt with this, my approach has been to bring other women with me. So if I'm in a space and I have the opportunity, I would like to bring more young Oromo women to join me there. And I think that's a way of also increasing that participation too.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you all for your contributions to that question. This is kind of related, but we're going to move on to the next question of how do you think the absence or the lack of recognition of Oromo women in the Oromo struggle has impacted our overall struggle? So as Arfa saying, I think Sariti brought up, a lot of the times they say one woman is enough, one youth is enough, but how does that absence or lack of support from the general community, how has that impacted our overall struggle? And I'll start with Najat.
I guess that's where people are, it's our blind side in the Oromo struggle is the impact that lack of visibility and acknowledgement of Oromo woman contribution to the struggle. And I also feel like if we can unpack that in some type of ways and utilize this powerful force, we might be able to move a lot quicker towards our goal than being stagnant in a state of stagnation, driven by male egos, or maybe like a chamber echo they make for themselves. Most of the time, what I found in all my involvements coming up is that whenever you have a woman and a youth in a mix, whether that's that one woman talking or what have you, the dynamic changes. The way things are done is different. It's like a catalyst, like, in a more, like in my, chemistry reading stuff, like when you add a catalyst to a chemical, it makes it go faster. And so you don't have to sit there for days waiting for that to materialize. And I think it's true for the Oromo struggle too. I think the sooner we can, see that potential, utilize that potential for what it is, and use it to move forward, the better we will be as people. And it has been evident since Jalu's assassination. What I have seen is exactly that. As soon as you see women of all ages step up to the plate and take their places and just kind of fill the gap, not only fill the gap, but actually represent us in that space and move, things without even, there are no egos involved. I've seen people work like a one huge machine, moving at different speeds but towards the same goal. And that's the kind of energy, that's the kind of synergy that we need for this struggle to move past this stagnation, because we have seen time and time again that this limitation of creating these male echo chambers, not that what they contribute is being minimized, or that I'm being disrespectful in that way, but that if you include all, you allow all of those skill sets and vibrant colors and forces and energies to help you move forward. And it has never been harmful to include more of our society. It has actually been harmful to exclude most of those forces from our struggle. And I think some will even argue, I don't know if it is part of your question, but like I hear things like, let's achieve Walabuma first and we'll talk about woman equality later. Or, there are things like that that you hear as a defense to this idea of, as Maritu said, intersectionality. I think about that a lot. So what does that mean? What does that look like in all of our identities, and how that could be utilized in a positive way instead of focusing how it impacts us negatively? And I think it's very important that we no longer wait for the other side to catch up, but more be assertive and make this case about why the involvement of women and youth is no longer an issue that's going to be entertained in a passive way, but more of like an urgent issue that needs to be addressed immediately if we are to make any substantial progress towards what we're seeking as people. And I think this summer was an ample example of what that can do for us. And they can look into all of those movements, and that's still ongoing, to see the impact it had on us as people, and to lift our people in such a positive way in the darkest of hours that we have faced since that, Hajalu's assassination. And I think this is a case to be made. I guess it's also on us as women to make that case forcefully and to link it to our progress, and we're not asking for a seat or credit or being recognized, but we're making the case that it's essential for our liberation to be all inclusive.
Thank you so much for that, Ninja. Actually, I love the reference you made to catalyst. That makes so much sense, that the women are the catalyst to the struggle. So thank you for that. Arfase, we'll move on to you to answer the question of how has the lack of involvement of Oromo women, or the lack of acknowledgement of because we've always been involved, but how does the lack of acknowledgement impacted our overall struggle?
I think it's had a big impact, and history shows us, right? Every time there's been a crucial point where the Oromo struggle could get to the next phase, it keeps repeating itself. It's the same thing over and over and over. But if there were more voices, or the acknowledgement of women were there, I truly believe that the outcome would have been very different, because even the way women think, what women bring to the table, is different than men just naturally. And so I think, if especially right now, I mean, yes, women are involved in every phase of the struggle right now, especially leading Oromo protests. We have Maratu here and Urge, and there's so many. Soreti has been involved. These are women day and night, and most people don't even know how Oromo protest is being run. Even the protests that were happening in the different communities, women are running these protests. But overall, in the political struggle, instead of it continuing to be like an old boys club, things happening, conversations happening behind closed doors. It's not that women don't want to be there. Sometimes they don't even know these conversations are happening. So I think for the greater good, even for our struggle, The men have to say, okay, we need women in this conversation. Not one woman, we need women. We need the voices of women in order to achieve our goal. If our goal is Walabumma, you cannot get there without the voice of Oromo women and youth. I remember I don't remember what year it was. I organized a panel actually for OSA, where I invited my professors in the African American Studies Department at the University of Minnesota. And something that always sticks with me is Professor Mahmoud Al-Kati said what made the civil rights movement a success was the involvement of, it was an intergenerational movement, right? The youth were involved, women were involved, men were involved, the elders were involved. All of these different voices bring something different to complete the struggle. So I think we as well need to look at a struggle that way, and that, I think that's the way that we can actually have a different change instead of just this change on paper or change on social media. We need a real change to get over this hump and start building our nation, not continue going back to the same spot in our struggle.
Yes, 100% agree with you, Arfase. Maro, I'll give you a chance to add your input to this question.
Yeah, Najat, you said something about, how some people say that we should wait until freedom to advocate for women and to focus on that aspect of our struggle as well. And it made me think of, I think it was Audre Lorde that said, there's no such thing as a single issue struggle because we do not live single issue lives. And so again, to just emphasize, I think it really would benefit us to focus on how we can make our struggle intersectional, because as you all said, I think that this is not only something that's beneficial for women, but if you truly can appreciate and value the contributions of women, and in this case, Oromo women, that would only help us achieve our goal faster. And it would also only make our process in the next phase of our struggle even smoother, I think. And yeah, I think that Oromo women and women in general, I think societally don't tend to be credit seeking. And so I have seen so many Oromo women who do such amazing work and make so much of a contribution to different efforts. And they, do so a lot of the times without any credit. And I think that kind of results in less women getting involved because they may not even realize how much women were responsible for making something happen. And I also am aware that, a lot of times the token woman gets invited into these spaces. And, especially in the case of young Oromo women, inserting themselves into spaces that are often run by not only Oromo men, but generally the older generation. And so they invite a young Oromo woman who comes in with all these ideas, brilliant ideas of how to change things for the better. And that is not always well received. So I think we also have to focus on being open to new approaches to things and new ideas as well.
Great. Sorority, if you want to take your turn.
I do feel like everything has been said, everything that I'm thinking has been said. I guess like Oromo women, when they talk about the importance of acknowledgement or involvement, as has been already said, are not doing it because they require this acknowledgement. They are looking at where our struggle is and where they want it to get, and realize that, okay, new diversity of ideas, fresh energies, perspectives are necessary to get us there. And thus far in our struggle, the perspectives that come from this lived experience, that of women or that of young people, haven't been involved. So it's kind of like a 1 + 1 = 2. Perhaps if we involve these ideas and that come from these experiences, we would be able to make better decisions. We'd be able to see more of the picture, and we'd be able to take steps forward. So again, it's been articulated that it's really just about making sure that we're using every single one of our resources available to us to get to where we want to go. We really do have the same goal. We want to see the same thing. But the perception that there are only certain people that can lead us there are certain people that need to hold the leadership positions, and it can't be any other way, is really going to make sure we never get free. So it's in the interest of, we all believe we want this freedom to change the way that we work and become, as Maro said, more intersectional.
Great responses all throughout. So I'm going to move to our next discussion point, which I think is kind of been touched on a bit here. It's discussing whether our identities or your identity as an Oromo woman in the diaspora specifically plays a role in how you are perceived in the Oromo struggle and Oromo activism. And how can we juxtapose the perception of Oromo women in the diaspora with how Oromo women in Oromia are treated when they attempt to involve themselves in the struggle? Arfase, we'll start with you.
My role as a Oromo woman in the diaspora, I guess in one way is we have access, right? A lot of the conversations are happening in the diaspora, so we have access. Maybe we know some of the players or those that are involved. But in terms of Oromo women in Oromia, I think it's important to bring their voices to the table, right? And mostly we're usually saying, oh, we're going to be the voice of the voiceless or amplify the voices of those in Oromia. We're actually in a time where they have access, at least when, when the government decides to keep the internet on. We can contact them easier, whether it's through phone, through social media, and bring their voices to the table, because no matter how Oromo we are or how much we think we know what's happening back home, we don't know because we're not physically there. We're not going through the daily experiences that they're having. So again, that's another responsibility that falls on our shoulders. How do we bring them into the conversation so they can speak from they can use their own voices to contribute to the struggle? Is something that we have the privilege of doing, and we should continue doing. I know we're all the women on this panel are doing that, but continue to do that and bringing more along.
For sure. Maro, I'll give the floor to you now.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of Oromo women in Oromia, it kind of makes everything that I may go through seem so minuscule in comparison. Just thinking of like several months ago, the Oromo women-led protests in certain parts of Oromia and how many of those women ended up jailed or murdered by security forces, simply for using their right to, their supposed right to free speech. It just makes the obstacles that I may face seem a lot more flat. And so I think, as Arfase said, I think our role in the diaspora is to really amplify the voices of Oromos back home, and because they don't have the ability to freely speak without consequences, and we do.
Thank you, Maro Soretti. I'll give the floor to you.
I definitely feel a sense of responsibility because my participation is from the diaspora, a sense of responsibility, sense of voices, and connect my everyday conversations about what has to be done or what's going on to people that are experiencing it daily. Despite my efforts, I think I could be doing more to do that. And I don't think that in regards to, building these connections with women that hasn't been sufficient on my own part. But I think that that's definitely a responsibility. I know it's a responsibility I hold really dear and I take really seriously. And I think that my efforts, I do feel they lack if that's not there, I guess, because as Arfase said, we're not there, not physically there. Even though we may feel like we know what's going on, to a large extent, we really do know what's going on. It's different when you hear it from folk who are on the ground, and it's their voices that are leading how you choose to move and what you choose to do. In terms of how women are treated, I wouldn't say any more than what Maro said. It's evident, like the weapons of war are deployed across Oromia daily, and there's no reservation to these weapons of war. We know that those weapons of war are even more brutal when it comes to women. I think it's also because it's recognized that when women who are leaders of families, who are influencers in communities, who are caretakers to the young people, so the kero and karre, if these women start to speak up and start to take a lead and become this courageous, then we really can't control anyone. And we really can't suppress anyone. So, the consequences are extremely grave. In terms of, I guess, in terms of the overall conversation we've been having about the position of women in our community, in our advocacy work, and how a lot of us have shared stories of having to kind of carve that out for ourselves or fight for it or experience some sense of challenges around it. And I know I've mentioned, the armed struggle a few times, but I do want to use an example from it again. We can learn a lot from it in terms of how we build our institutions and our structures in regards to the construct of gender in the diaspora from the structures used in armed struggle, because it's really about what you contribute. You're ready to contribute, you're welcomed. You contribute better than the man next to you, then you move up in leadership ranks. And again, it's because what the goal is when we talk about how this armed struggle is structured is the goal is to get to Olabuma. Every resource that is available to us must be used to get to that place. So if this resource is better than this resource, just based on the gifts you have or the ability you have, the skill you have, or this resource is better placed here than placed here, there's no consideration of, at least from my understanding and from what I've seen and the conversations I've had, there's no consideration of the ego and of men must be in this position more than others, and even so I think there's, in terms of the juxtaposition of how women are perceived, that's something I say. I'll leave it there.
Perfect. Thank you, Soreti. Najat?
I guess all the points have been touched on, but there's this thing with perception and reality when it comes to Oromo women. And the reality is Oromo women have been there since day one. They never left the post. They pay for this struggle in more ways than one. But the perception of it is it's, sugarcoating that whole, or the lack of credibility and acknowledgement we've been talking about kind of removes the contribution and the continued contribution of the Oromo woman from our forefront. So most of the time people, even the discussion we're having now, we say, what is, the impact of Oromo struggle, Oromo women on Oromo struggle and things like that. And then you say, but this has been a continuous thing. It's just that we're fighting the perception of it, the perception that we're not there somehow, that we're taking a pause, or we need to come back in more force or more numbers or what have you. And that's a perception that needs to marry into the reality that's on the ground. And one of the things that I have noticed from Finfinne to all the small little towns and villages in Oromia is that women have been talking to each other. They have been making these little nuclear families among themselves to kind of, figure out a strategy in their own terms to move forward. And I have spoken to some of these groups and individuals, yes, not maybe to the extent that it needs to happen, but I am hopeful that they have found their voice in a way that is free from any gender influences or societal norms or that whole perception. For example, there's this group in Finfinne the Oromo Women Association of Infinite or something rather, and they have been doing an amazing, quiet but very effective, impactful work. And they do this without, causing all kinds of attention to themselves. But I talked to one of the leaders, and she flat out told me, "Yes, we know what the consequences are. We are aware of what can happen to us, but we're stepping up regardless." And these are the kind of voices that you hear all across, from Haramaya to Awadai to Jedoa to, like, I can name so many different places. And I was in awe of this woman who find a covert way to meet and discuss and strategize and put their bodies and limbs and their own safety on the line for us. And so, like Murtu said, and all of you, as a woman in the diaspora, we have that privilege of access, of safety, of freedom of speech. And so our job, always, I say, I don't agree to the phrase of being voice of the voiceless, because they have a voice. They've been using their voice. They own their voice. Our job is to assist in whichever way we can so that those voices are present and they are being brought in to small conversations, big conversations, in the way forward. Because most of the stuff, whether we are, women or men in the diaspora, we tend to kind of prescribe what Oromia needs based on what we look at from afar, and then decide, oh, this is what I need to take this next step to get to that point. And I don't think that has worked for us in a positive way. In fact, maybe it even caused us harm in a long term. So to echo back to our Fase's point, to bring those conversations from the ground into our conversations here, and to find a way we can assist them, to bring those goals to fruition, is our job. I think I call myself a conduit, like that's all I can do, is to channel their energy and to find resources, if I can, on this side of the aisle, so that they can do what they do best already. And I think that gives them a sense of empowerment, leadership, of ownership of what they're facing on day-to-day basis, and also kind of allow them to bring us that blueprint for the struggle to come to fruition. And I don't think we're the owner of the struggle. And I know that some of us, the male counterparts, they think that the struggle is like something that needs to be concocted here in the diaspora and prescribed back to the Oromia, and then they take it from you, and then take the ball home. And I don't think that has worked. And I think we need to see it in a reverse way, actually. Let them lead, let them ask what we can do with our privilege here, whether we're male or female, young or old, and be of a supportive role instead of the leadership one, in that sense, if it makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. And so I'm going to move on to our next question, and it's a bit of a twofold question, so if I need to repeat it, just let me know. But do any of you believe that there is a generational difference between how younger and older Oromo women participate in the struggle and activism and advocacy? I asked this because in 2014 and 2018, Oromo youth took a historic lead in the Oromo struggle. But we saw that the older generation very much supported them in that. So what do you see as the role of Oromo women of all generations? Well, first, what is the difference in how they participate in the struggle, if there is a difference? And what is the role of Oromo women of all generations in contributing to the movement, the youth movement, and just the overall Oromo struggle? Arfase, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, a great most recent example is what's been going on the last 6 months. As we've seen, women and people from across the board have stepped up. Some who have actually decided, I'm not going to do anything anymore. I'm sick of this. I can't be a part of this. Have stepped up and contributed based on their knowledge and skills, which showed all the different ways that our people were protesting or raising awareness about the struggle back home. I mean, the Australian women renting an airplane and, flying it across the city because they couldn't physically get out, in that way, or protesting on a boat, or there's just been all the different advocacy or different protests that have been going on the past 6 months shows that, or the women back home who are protesting physically. It's not that they wanted to go and they see what's happening around them, but they knew they had no other choice. And in order for their voices to be heard was to go and protest in the streets while, with the risk of being killed. And some were killed, some are still languishing in the prisons right now. So, and everyone, what was the second part? Sorry, I don't know if I answered it.
No, I think you're answering it. It's just, what's the role of Oromo women across generations?
And it's that in supporting one another. One of the biggest things that we've seen is being able to use social media to its fullest, especially this round of protests and especially I'm always touting Oromo protest group where I go because this is new. So I think being able to use all the resources that are available to us and getting all the different voices has helped in this way, and showed how women of the various generations have been involved.
Najat, I'll give the floor to you.
I guess there is hierarchy, not of importance, but the way we contribute. So the older generations have built some sort of a foundation for us. We have been inspired and built on that, and I think that's just what happens. My kid, who is 13 now, has a different worldview, and she brings something totally different than I do. So I think it's every generation has its own gifts and skills and things that are not afforded to me. And so when you come together, however, something magical happens. And I think since this summer, that's what I've witnessed in different spaces with Oromo women and the youth, and just intergenerational thing. Because I guess when I think about this intergeneration, like older generation, younger woman or man, what I think about is trauma. And of course, that's like a huge, huge topic, and it needs a lifetime of unpacking. But what a trauma does is it isolates individuals within their communities. And I think we have that collective trauma that kind of builds walls in each individual Oromo, more so, around women than, of course, other gender. But what that does is that everybody's kind of, in their own little, walls. It's very hard to reach out and build that network and to come together and to break down that barrier and to bring what you have to offer together to affect change. And I think that what you see with the youth is that they have less of that present coming up. Maybe a secondary trauma, but not as much impact as the older generation does. And so they have the ability to kind of break through that wall and reach out to that generation and bring them forth into that space. And so something magical happens in that instant. And the older generation can look at the youth and see what was possible if this wasn't perpetuated on them. And you that makes you want to continue this fight, because you want to give the next generation even more freer society, more freer space, more freer Oromo that is proud and is not afraid, and it's, it has a country and all these things. And so I think that's the game that we play, the tit for tat dance around how to break down that barrier, but also acknowledge the past has catapulted this generation to this space, and we continue to move in that direction of progress. But as Martu said earlier, it's a thing that we inherit, but we want to be the generation to say, I don't want to give that to my kid. I want it to stop with me, but they can have that freer society, that space we want to achieve.
Yes, for sure. Soreti, I'll give it to you now.
For me, I want to emphasize the symbiotic nature between the work of both of these generations, how dependent we are on each other. So some, experiences of my own, I remember so much of my understanding of our history has come through listening to what particularly women and men, definitely, but there are moments where there's a certain shop in a certain neighborhood called Footscray out in Melbourne, which is known for large and small Oromo businesses and East African businesses, as an enclave. They're kind of like you all have something similar in Minnesota. I've forgotten the name of it though. And so it's in these shops and sitting with women like Ade Nuria Rashid, who every time I come in would take it as an opportunity, pass on as much knowledge as she could from her life and pass on as many life experiences as she could to further give me, I guess, a foundation to understand what happened in the past to continue to do what I do now. And I've seen this also in my interactions with Adekwe Kumsa, and not just interactions with her work, which has also been so significant, actually life-changing. In reading some of the Songs of Exile, I remember like just really, you know, moments coming across concepts like Godansa Sinke, which if she didn't write about, I wouldn't know about. You know, that being again more foundation for me to understand my role in the struggle, but also interaction with her and her story. People like Ade Angatu, who has just like a wide range of experience in our struggle, her personal experience, her sharing that with me, and then, you know, these women and also a lot of men creating opportunities and creating space because they want us, and in my experience, to be able to go and use this foundation to create, you know, the newness and the freedom that they've been striving for as well. And there have been priceless moments where I've seen these same individuals or individuals of this generation, of the older generation, become like overcome with emotion at certain things that we achieve, that us young people achieve. And they also know that has, and I think we acknowledge that it has a lot to do with the fact that we've received so much knowledge and encouragement and platform, you know, from them. And in particular, I just want to focus on this knowledge, this transfer of knowledge, and in the different ways that it occurs, and that without it, I personally wouldn't know enough or even believe enough in the capacity of our cause if I didn't know that there were people who have been giving their lives for a very long time, and I didn't know the exact nature of how that happened. So that's been really important for me, and I think that reflects the relationship between the struggle, or how we participate in the struggle as different generations, and how we need each other.
Wonderful. Moro, I'll give it to you now.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think in addition to, you know, there are changes between the generations, and I think looking forward, my hope is that, you know, the question around what Oromo women's contribution can and should be in the struggle will shift from that mindset to seeing Oromo women as having the potential to be involved the same way any other person would be involved. And yeah, that's just what I would add.
Perfect. Now we're gonna move. Yes.
Excuse me. I have another meeting in 10 minutes, so I have to get going.
Yes.
So thank you for having us, and I think, and I'm honored to be on this panel with you ladies. And I guess a message that I would have for young Oromo women is knowing that, you know, you can do it, and you deserve to be in that space. Just stand in your experience and your knowledge, and know that you deserve to be there. You can be there, and you have such great examples who've come before you, and to reach out. I mean, if there's anywhere that I can help, I know right now it's there's a lot going on, but if there's any way that I can help, even if it's not me, I can connect you to someone else who may be able to help you along with the journey. So thank you, Hawi, and
thank you, Arfase.
and OSA. Okay, have a good
Thank you, Arfase. Bye. Okay, so we're gonna move right now into our closing, and with our closing remarks, I just want each of you to let us know about campaigns like Oromo protests, Walabuma, that are currently being done that the general Oromo public should be aware about. So I'll start with Moro, and we'll go around like that.
Thank you. So yeah, I would be happy to share some resources. So I'll just, I mentioned earlier the Oromo Advocacy Alliance. So I would strongly encourage you all to go to oromoadvocacy.org. The Oromo Advocacy Alliance has a lot of resources related to advocacy, and these resources are really user-friendly. So I would strongly encourage you all to check that out. As far as campaigns and Oromo protests, definitely follow Oromo protests. A lot of you are probably watching on Facebook, so head over, type in Oromo protests, and that's the name of the Facebook page. Or you can go to facebook.com/Oromo protests. The website is oromoprotests.org. On Twitter, you can find Oromo protests at Oromo Protests HQ, and also on Instagram at Oromo protests. And then also regarding Team Free Oromia and the Free Oromia podcast, you can find us at freeoromia.org, or on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Team Free Oromia.
Perfect. Soreti?
Yeah, you can check out the coalition Walabomu, which you can find at www.walabomu.com, and Walabomu at Complete Liberation. I think there's only one on like Twitter, Instagram, so you won't be able to miss it. What else? A page that I have been really interested in and I think their work is quite impactful is Wabo Jabesa, and I believe that their work is really trying to normalize the Oromo's right to self-defense and give people an into how this institution actually works and what its codes of conduct are and the like. And I think this is really valuable knowledge in this time. So I would definitely encourage people to check them out. They're on Instagram, and I believe they're on Facebook as well at Wabo Jabesa. And I also echo all the institutions and resources that Maratu just mentioned are wonderful. I use them myself. I refer other people to them, so I'd encourage that you check them out as well.
Awesome. Najat?
I continue to be a presence on social media and kind of linking individuals on the ground to various resources. Quiet work, but a necessary one. For now, I kind of, as I said, scaled back on bigger involvement due to time constraints at this time. Going back to school at this age is not fun, you guys, but it needed to be done. However, I have my own initiatives that I started at Sania Foundation over a year and a half ago, almost 2 years now. But what transpired in Oromia with the whole political situation kind of put our efforts on hold. That was supposed to be a nonprofit organization that was designed to help Oromo, young Oromo women in school back in Oromia, but that's no go for now. But I've been thinking about how to counterfeit that to serve the Oromo girls here. So that'll be something that I'm gonna spend time in developing, turning it around into the diaspora community until Walabuma is achieved. When Soreti and her team make that happen, my organization will go swoop in and, do the work that needs to be done. And I'm looking forward to kind of reconnect back to some efforts, Oromo protests being one, and kind of, keep myself busy, do what I can to help, just being present. I think we get that sometimes as a woman, to just be even constant presence is important to the young ladies who are coming up right now and standing in their own greatness. And so we will continue to do so, even if I just come on and just breathe, and just be there. And I think that's what I will continue to do. Thank you for having us.
Thank you all so much for being panelists on this segment. I'm going to close out the segment now, but I wanted to say all of you are an inspiration in your own right. I'm so grateful to be in this space with you all. And to the viewers, thank you so much for watching and providing your input, and have a good day. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Howie. And thank you, Ola.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Zoe. Thanks, everyone.